Okay, hello everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. So yes, welcome to the Chartered Institute of Fundraising South East and London region's first Thursday panel discussion on community fundraising lessons learnt during lockdown. So my name's Juliet Ellis. I chair the South East and London Committee, and we're doing this event in collaboration with the Community Fundraising SIG. So a massive thank you to them for putting together a wonderful panel. And another big thank you to the CIOF First Thursday team, who are going to be coming up on the next slide, Stephen. Stephen? In theory, you're going to see a lovely picture of us. Oh, the next slide. Thank you. There we go. They've been busy beavering away putting this event together. But all of us share the one aim in common of the fact that we're dedicated to promoting excellence in fundraising. Please do tweet about the event using the hashtag CIOF Thursday. Please also tag the speakers, their Twitter handles are coming up, and us at COIF SE London. We do like the short and snappy titles, but that would be fabulous. We are recording this morning's event, so please do anonymise yourself if you wish to do so. Finally, for those of you who aren't yet members of the Chartered Institute, then just for attending today's event, I can offer you a discount code, which is LDN/group. I'll repeat, LDN/group, which will give you a whopping £44 off your first annual membership. Woohoo! And on that note, I will hand over to Julie Roberts, our head of events, who's now going to run through how today's session is going to work. Julie.
Thanks, Juliet. Morning, everyone. So nice to see you all here with us. Just a few house rules. So today, to make the most out of this webinar, it's really, really great if you can ask as many questions as you can. You will see on the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button. So if you have questions that you would like to ask any of our fabulous panelists today, please pop them in. Doesn't matter when, any time whilst they're speaking. And if you have got any other questions or any other, you're dealing with any technical issues, just pop them in the chat and I'll deal with that too. But questions to the panelists, Q&A button. So next slide, please, Stephen. Okay, back to you, Juliet.
Lovely, thanks, Julie. So I'm really excited to introduce today's speakers. Our panel has been led by my fellow CIOF chair, Clara Goddard, who's a public fundraising expert specialising in small charities and hospice with over 14 years experience. Apparently she started off working as an aspiring actress, but as her only paid gig was an extra in the TV show Hustle, she decided that fundraising was more her bag. And we're glad that you made the leap, Sarah. Leah Lewis, if we can have the next slide, please, thank you, is a freelance fundraising consultant at Civitas Consultancy in Buckinghamshire and specialises in community fundraising and events. She has a wealth of experience working with both local and national charities in and around the Buckinghamshire area. Sadly, she doesn't often get to share her rare talent, which is being able to lick her elbow. Think you can do it? Think again. And I wonder how many of you are trying that just now.
Don't ask me how I found out I could do it either, because I don't know.
That's subject for another evening, probably with mine involved. On to the next slide, please, Stephen. Thank you. So Clara Gill started life working in sales and marketing for companies in the UK, Canada and the US, and she moved into the charity sector 10 years ago. She's worked in events and corporate for Shine, Action Medical Research for Children, and is currently at Marie Curie. Not one to follow convention, Clara lives on a boat in Brighton with her husband, daughter, cats and dog. Sounds lovely.
Amazing.
Sean Forshaw, if we have the next slide, please, thank you. He works for Alzheimer's Research UK as their London East Regional Fundraising Officer, and he's only worked for them since lockdown. And in fact, he started on the first day of the first lockdown back in March. What a time to join. So it's been unusual to say the least, but there have been lots of highlights and successes, which I'm sure he's going to share with us. Apparently in his first year at uni, he used to go on weekly bucket collections in the winter, topless, and painted as a different theme each week. And that really made me giggle when he told us that. Thank you, Sean. And on that lovely note, I shall now hand over to Clara. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juliet. So just to give you a little bit of background, we're going to be talking obviously about lockdown and fundraising, etc. So for us, strategically and logistically, The Great Daffodil Appeal for Marie Curie is by far the largest campaign that we run each year. And it takes place throughout every March and April. It takes months of preparation, and it's Marie Curie's equivalent of the Poppy Appeal. It involves thousands of venues and volunteers across the country. So lockdown on March the 23rd created chaos for us, obviously, as it did for everyone, but at a time when our nursing services were more in demand than ever, and one of our major streams of revenue was brought to a standstill mid-campaign. So we scrambled to cancel all of our collections, and we planned that we'd planned for the end of March and all of April. Next slide, please. So what did we do? Anyone from Community Fundraising not on furlough picked up the phones. We called our supporters, our volunteers. We sent out the Marie Curie equivalent of a bat signal, a call to arms. We launched our emergency appeal. We spoke to everybody that we were stewarding through an event that was being postponed. We talked to them about what else they could do to help now. We chatted with all of our Great Daffodil Appeal volunteers, our community corporate partners, anyone and everyone. But we were very clear and transparent with our supporters. We talked about the fundraising hole we had, but we also talked about what we were doing to plug that hole. It's easy to say that you have a shortfall, but people want to know what you as a charity are doing to actively fill that hole. So they want to know that you're trying new things, speaking to the right people, and looking at every avenue available. Ultimately, we raised over £7 million, which gave us, Marie Curie, some breathing room. And then we as an organisation adapted to the new normal. Furlough has meant that new teams have been created temporarily, and that Marie Curie fundraisers are working together in a totally new way. Old geographical boundaries no longer have the same meaning. The territorial feelings of the past are no longer relevant. We have new cross-department teams to help ensure new ideas can be implemented more quickly. And for a charity of Marie Curie's size, that's no mean feat. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to mention some of the successes that we've had over lockdown besides our emergency appeal. So Marie Curie were chosen to take part in the 2.6 challenge, and we raised the most of any charity, raising over £190,000. We have a summer event, the Blooming Great Tea Party, and that went virtual, with supporters holding tea parties on Zoom and WhatsApp. Next slide, please. We held celebrity virtual quizzes, including a Gavin and Stacey themed quiz hosted by Alison Steadman, aka Pamela, a Downton Abbey and Harry Potter themed quiz hosted by husband and wife acting royalty, Jim Carter and Imelda Staunton. And we raised over £85,000 from all of our different quizzes. But our most fabulous and innovative successes came from our fundraising groups, our volunteers and supporters, and our staff. So this is a picture of our very own Hannah Taylor. So Hannah would usually volunteer at one of our local collections during the Great Daffodil Appeal, but as it was cancelled, she stood dressed in her Marie Curie finest for 2 hours on Facebook Live, talking about Marie Curie in the same way that she would have done if she was doing a public collection. It's such a simple idea, but it was really, really effective. Next slide, please. So one of our supporters is a professional photographer, and during lockdowns, whilst he can't work, he organises to take photos of people on their doorsteps. He doesn't charge for it, he just asks for a donation if someone wants to make one. And so far, he's raised over £10,700. But I mean, I love those photos, they're so cute, I'd definitely sign up for that. And then the next slide is one of my personal favourites. One of our longtime supporters who takes his alpacas to visit our patients in one of our hospices in Edinburgh offered to have his girls visit online meetings so people can donate to have an alpaca to visit their Rotary talk, team meeting or Christmas party. Next slide, please. So looking forward to Christmas, again, our traditional collections are not possible. So we have taken our remembrance services and events online this Christmas. We've also organised 5 new celebrity Christmas themed quizzes, seeing as our other ones were so successful. And we have a number of festive fundraising ideas that supporters can pick a mix from. So it creates a more bespoke event that works for our supporters, our volunteers, their families, or in the corporate community world, their colleagues. And we've launched our virtual advent calendar, which for a one-off donation gives the buyers access to a myriad of festive how-to videos and downloadable activities with something for absolutely everyone. So I want to finish up by saying that there have been a number of studies done during lockdown. Now, these studies have shown that nearly half of the British public would consider participating in a virtual fundraising event. The public donated an additional £800 million to charity during the lockdown. And in the UK, during the initial phase of the pandemic, 59% of the public donated to charity. An astonishing 84% of 18 to 24-year-olds have donated in the last 3 months to charity. And while other age groups are also still giving generously, it is the young people who are most energised to give. Why am I telling you this? Next slide, please. The point I'm making is that this is not a time for pessimism. I hear a lot of negativity in the charity sector at the moment. Charity's dead, charity can't survive, oh, it must be almost impossible to get people to give at the moment. Charity is alive and kicking. The United Kingdom has a really rich history of giving when times are tough. And although we don't all have a Captain Tom, we do all have amazing volunteers and supporters. And there is still money out there and a propensity by people to give. So I want to say, let's support each other. Let's share ideas and where possible, work together. People often love to give more to more than one charity, which is why Children in Need and Comic Relief work so well. So let's collaborate with each other. If we have a shared cause so that we can do bigger and better things, because the bottom line is that we have people or animals relying on us to make a difference. And that ultimately, that's what we all want to do. And if we can achieve that goal together, then society is a better place as a whole. Thank you.
Okay, shall we go over to our next speaker?
Morning, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for having me this morning. It's fantastic to join you all. I'm going to share some lessons that I've learned and some tips and reminders to help you continue your amazing fundraising successes. So my first point this morning would be to keep in touch with people. Network as much as you can. Get involved in discussions in groups on Facebook, in LinkedIn. Be more active on your LinkedIn page. I was furloughed for 4.5 months, and it was only through talking to other fundraisers and connecting with people and learning the experiences and what they're going through. It just makes you feel so much better. Most of us are working from home at the moment, so just try and keep in touch with what other people are doing. You are not on your own. There's most likely to be another fundraiser out there who's thinking about the same challenges or has the answers to what your potential challenge is. So just reach out to those people. There are some fantastic groups out there that can give you that support. Tip number 2, learn from others. Clara has just made some fantastic suggestions and some amazing successes, so absolutely brilliant. You can learn from some of these things that other fundraisers are doing. You may not want to copy the idea exactly, but you could adapt these ideas to your organisation. Don't be afraid to seek advice from other fundraisers. We're all learning as we're going along. We're adapting to a continuously changing environment. So don't be afraid to ask questions and ask your peers, even if they're not in your team. Just network with people and learn from others. The chances are they're experiencing the same things as you, and you can actually have a discussion and work things out there and then, and help other people as well with the challenges that you're having. Tip number 3, sorry. I really like this quote. Don't be a sheep, be the shepherd. More often than not, organisations are copying ideas or jumping on the back of something else just because it worked for them. Just because it worked for another charity doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you and your organisation. So consider the needs and interests and the history of your supporters. How do they access fundraising opportunities with your organisation? What engages them? What makes them tick? What do they like? So as an example, if you know that the majority of your donors prefer cycling and you host a massive virtual bake sale, are you going to engage them? Probably not. But if you do something cycling related or fitness related, you're more likely to engage them. So think about that. Adapt an idea to suit your charity, but don't just do something because everybody else is doing it. It could be quite damaging. And tip number 4, remember that nothing happens overnight. As community fundraisers, it's sometimes so disheartening when we're beavering away, we're putting so much effort in, and sometimes results don't happen overnight. All the work you're doing at the moment will have a huge impact in months to come. If you're sat there waiting for it to happen, not actively doing anything, obviously you're not going to have the results you want. So just keep doing what you're doing. Keep contacting your supporters, stay in touch with them, keep them updated with the achievements your charity is making. And that doesn't have to be fundraising successes. It could be something that a fantastic opportunity or success that your beneficiaries have achieved. Just share what's going on. It's better to say something to a fundraising group and keep in touch with them. You don't have to have a fundraising ask, just let them know what's going on. Just as an example, the charity I'm working with, Carers Bucks, are engaging with our local Freemasons group. And during lockdown, they said, well, we obviously can't fundraise at the moment because our usual fundraising activities, we can't do them, but we really want to support in some way. And Carers Bucks were really proactive and said, we have loads of carers who aren't online, can't access any of the support we're doing at the moment. So can you put together some pamper packs and distribute them to the carers in our area? Excuse me. They put together some funding, £3,000 to distribute pamper packs. It's just like Avon little packs with bubble bath in, some bath bombs, foot scrub, just nice little care packs to support them in a really isolating time. And it worked so well, they're doing it again for Christmas. So it doesn't have to be a fundraising success. It could be gifts in kind. You are doing a fantastic job at the moment, even if it feels like you're not. So just keep going. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay, over to our next speaker, Sean.
Hello, thank you very much. So hi, I'm Sean. As was mentioned before, I'm a regional fundraising officer for Alzheimer's Research UK. And I started working for Alzheimer's Research UK actually on the 23rd of March, which was the first day of lockdown. And it's also my first job in fundraising. And then at the start of May, my whole team was furloughed, apart from 3 of us who weren't eligible because we'd started after the cutoff. So I went from learning the job for being the fundraiser for East London to covering the RFO role for the whole of the south of England for the charity. So it's safe to say it's probably been the strangest start to a job I've ever had and probably ever will have. And aside from my interview, I've actually only ever met my team over Teams. So that has also been quite strange. That's just a bit of background about me. I'm sure many of you will have done similar things to what I'm going to go through over the next couple of minutes. But I thought I'd outline a few of the successes I've had personally over the last few months and some of the successes we've had across the whole of ARUK and the key reasons why I think these might have worked for us. So one thing that I found really helpful, especially at the start when I first started, was to focus on groups that I knew would still be going ahead with regular applications despite restrictions. And one area I had a lot of experience with was student fundraising from my university days. So I knew that regardless of the pandemic, that they'd still need to proceed with applications because the academic year would still run somewhat normally. There'd still be members of RAGs that would leave after graduating and incoming members to RAGs that would start university in September. And to be fair, regardless of the pandemic, universities would have been high on my list to target anyway because of my previous experience. So it's just a happy coincidence that applications were still going forwards. But I do think that the key thing I took away from this relating to the pandemic was that it was really helpful to identify areas that would still be proceeding somewhat normally or hadn't been as affected as others or might have even profited from the pandemic to focus on. And really focusing on your own personal strengths out of these groups to really make the most out of these opportunities. So we're currently taking this approach with some of our smaller regional corporate asks as well, focusing on asks to businesses that might have done well at the moment rather than the businesses that might have been struggling, and just being sensitive that not everyone might be in the best position to fundraise at the minute and just targeting people that are more likely to be in that position. Obviously, as I'm sure many charities have been doing, we're currently having talks with a lot of our current partners around extending partnerships past the current agreed end dates that we've had in place. But as a result of this, for new regional corporate and community group partnerships, we're temporarily shifting our focus away from more traditional year-long and ongoing partnerships, while groups are finding it a bit harder to fundraise because of the restrictions. And like I've mentioned before, a lot of businesses are struggling. And with all these extended partnerships in place, we've decided to temporarily shift our focus away from that and try and do a more one-off asks to different groups in the hope that while they might not want to commit to a formal partnership, they'll be interested in a tailored ask or call to action that would be specific to them. So one example of this is we're asking people to donate their last hour of pay or the cost of their likely cancelled Christmas parties. So hopefully they'll be more likely to take these one-off asks on, and it'll also help pave the way for future relationships at a better time for the more formal partnerships. At the start of lockdown, an event that ARUK identified as kind of an ideal one to move virtually was our Mighty Quiz, which is a pub quiz pack that we had ready to go out. But this was adapted virtually when quizzing was all the rage at the beginning of lockdown. We found Jay's Virtual Pub Quiz, who was an up-and-coming, very popular virtual pub quizzer at the start of lockdown. And with the help of some of our celebrity partners to host special rounds of him, we partnered with him and managed to raise over £300,000 from different quizzes through that. So that was really good. And on the back of that, we had a load of people downloading our virtual Mighty Quiz pack from it. So it gave us loads of potential new supporters to engage with. And with the Mighty Quiz as an easy fundraising ask to go to them with straight away. But I think the key lesson from this was remaining aware to popular trends and trying to be quick to act on them before someone gets in there or the hype fades, as I'm sure we all got quizzed out about halfway through the first lockdown. It became a bit much, but while it was big, it was really a really useful thing to try and get on the back of. Currently, what we're doing as a charity in the community fundraising department is to try and re-engage some warm supporters from the past who have fundraised for us in the past 2 years with targeted asks. So right now that's mostly about Christmas fundraising. But hopefully the hope is with these fundraisers is that they'd have some sort of affinity to us as a charity from their past fundraising and want to help out if they can. So we're reaching out by phone calls and emails, obviously as long as the GDPR allows, and being clear around how the COVID-19 has impacted us as a charity, how it's impacted our fundraising, as well as the people living with dementia. We've got some seasonal asks to put out to them, like I just mentioned. So this includes a Christmas version of the Mighty Quiz that we're sending out to all the supporters that came through on the back of the virtual Mighty Quizzes earlier in the year, Christmas fundraising packs, and a virtual festive fun run, depending on what the supporter, it can be tailored to what the support has done in the past and the type of fundraising that they've been interested to in the past. And then finally, this might be a slightly off topic and not really about fundraising, but one thing that I've definitely learned from working through the pandemic is to just be a bit more forgiving with myself when things aren't always going right. I think it's easy sometimes to focus on missed opportunities and feeling really guilty if you've had a really unproductive day. But I think at the end of the day, we're all trying to do our best and what we can with the situation we've been dealt this year. And sometimes you've just got to accept that it's not all going to be easy. So if everything isn't going perfectly, that's okay. And you just need to try and not beat yourself up too much about it, which I've definitely been guilty of in the past. But learning to be a bit more forgiving with myself, I think, has been an important part of fundraising this year, for me anyway. So to kind of summarize briefly, I think the key lessons I've learned so far in the pandemic is firstly to try and identify groups that are still likely to be active and focusing on your strengths within those groups to maximize the potential of them, to be aware and adaptable to new trends and situations, to be sensitive to the position of groups, the different positions they might be in at the moment because of the pandemic and what else might be going on. Remembering the value of past supporters that might be waiting to be re-engaged, but remembering at the end of the day, if it all goes wrong at the minute, just be kind to yourself and remember that we're all in the same boat, and hopefully there's a great new opportunity around the corner. Thanks.
Brilliant, thanks, Sean. That was really, really helpful. Right, over to you, Sarah.
Great, brilliant. I will keep this brief because I feel like our amazing speakers have already covered so much. So I keep giving a little bit of insight into where I've been during lockdown. So I took up a role as interim head of fundraising at a local hospice in South London. And when I joined that team, none of the team had been furloughed, which I appreciate is a very fortunate position. Across community and events, we had about 3 full-time equivalent, 3 and a little bit. And it was so important for our director and our team that we didn't furlough the staff. A, because we wanted to try and keep going and keep bringing that income in. Our charity needed us. But just as important, if not maybe even more important, is our supporters needed us. And that for me was such a key thing. So I know there's a few people in the attendees from hospices or local charities where actually their beneficiaries in the work that they do might have a big crossover with their supporter pool. And that's such a key thing for you to remember. You know, for us, a lot of our community activities, a lot of our events that we were doing were just as an important part of the remembering someone special or the grief process and the grieving process as it was as a chance to raise money and give back to the hospice. And we had a responsibility to keep trying to offer our supporters a way to do that. You know, it might not be the same. We might not be able to do our runs in the same way that we've done them or what have you, but we needed to give our supporters a way to remember someone, a way to honour someone, a way to manage their grief. So the big focus for our team was about what can we still keep going? All right, we might need to change how we're doing it, but let's do it. The team moved really fast. The big thing is we had very little digital experience in our team, or at least the team did before, you know, I joined. I don't claim to be a digital expert either. It wasn't something we'd hugely done before. We'd done a lot of very traditional activities, virtual events, streaming, running them online, brand new to us. We didn't have a comms and marketing team to support us. So we just launched ourselves in and we tried what we could. And we reached out to our communities, we reached out to our contacts. You know, the team found videographers and streaming experts and photographers and people who were willing to do online sessions for events and all of these things. We got them to help us. And everything that the team adopted was with a philosophy of we just need to try it. You know, we've committed to doing these activities and these programs. Some we might need to cancel, but some actually we just need to give it a go. And some of them didn't come out exactly how we wanted them to. But some of them really, really did, and then some. So Open Gardens, for instance, an activity that I know a lot of hospices do, other local charities might also do. We took that virtual. Our website was not our friend, and it was not going to lend itself to hosting the amount of videos that we had. So we had everyone who would normally open their gardens to go and film a little video tour. A friend of our trustees, built us a Wix website. Was it perfect? Was it exactly what we would have chosen to do? No. Did it work? Did it fulfill the need for our supporters? And did it direct people to raise money? Yes. And that was the point. This is what I mean about the team moving fast. And then actually, because lockdown restrictions eased, we found we were also able to offer the Open Gardens for a very short period, for one weekend, with, you know, all the restrictions, all the safety things in it. And that one weekend, because so many of our supporters really wanted to go and see those gardens in person, raised almost as much as it has in previous years, plus everything we'd raised from the virtual event as well. So that one activity actually raised more than we did in previous years because we had that blend. You know, for London Marathon, we only had a very small number of places. Fortunately, we're based in Greenwich, where the London Marathon starts. We arranged for some of our supporters to come and do laps of Greenwich Park as part of their virtual London Marathon. Again, was it perfect? Was it the marathon experience? No. Was it people coming together and cheering each other on and having that sense of community? Yeah, and that was what was really important. And this year, you know, we've continued doing that. We ran a Santa's Grotto in a market. And again, we were wondering, are we going to be able to do that? Lockdown 2.0, all of that jazz. But actually, the event manager worked really hard at looking at all the restrictions, looking at the health and safety advice and running it safely. And because we were able to still give the community the activity they expected, we sold out quicker than we have in previous years and are trying to now add more capacity to try and raise money from it. And you know, actually the team now are not a million miles off budget, and they're absolutely smashing the reforecast figures that we put in earlier in the year because they've just kept trying and kept going. So for me, the top tips and top lessons from lockdown that hopefully you can take away and take back to your charities is know the value of your supporters. You know, always know how awesome they are, but importantly, remember your charity's value to them as well. Talk to them. What's important to them? You know, for charities like hospices, so many activities, like I say, are a real important part of that grieving and remembering process. Reach out to those who can help. You know, yes, your supporters, exactly as a few of the other speakers have said, is get on the phones to your supporters, but find out who else has skills and expertise to help you. I think it was one of our retail van drivers is also a DJ and was running like an online music streaming event, like all of these connections and things that the team had. They were like, I know who can help. I know who'll be really good at that. And that was great because it was all in the team's head and they were brilliant at those relationships. Actually, though, what is really awesome is keep those skills and expertise on your database. Imagine how awesome it would have been if we could have run a report that says, you know, attributes and skills, and we could have had a whole list of people who were DJs, videographers, photographers. Start that now, because when you need to raise that call to arms and rally out and find people who can help you, you want to be able to know who you can ask. So know your relationships, but also get them on your database as well. And my third biggest tip is be brave. You know, keep your objectives front of mind and test and try new things with those objectives in mind. Cross over where you can and where it makes sense. Reach out to your individual giving team and find out how they can help you optimize your virtual event landing page. You know, IG know all about those little nudges and little ways to ask the question that will prompt people to make that one-off donation. Talk to your individual giving team, ask for their help. Reach out to your trust team or your trust fundraiser. They might be able to help you with those local community grants and those local little pots of money. They can give you some top tips and advice for sending off those applications. And again, it's getting that money in. Come together as a team, share skills, share experience, and share your expertise. And exactly as a couple of other people have mentioned as well, reach outside your network. Throughout lockdown, my team have more than ever reached out to fundraising groups, networks, webinars like this. And so many of them have found people that have given them a top tip or a little bit of advice or something they can recommend that they've brought back and has already raised money. So make the most of your networks like these, reach out to other fundraisers, because, you know, just to echo exactly what Clara, Sean and Leah have all said, is we are stronger together and we're all in it together. So let's help each other out. That's everything from me. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks Sarah, and thank you to all the panelists. That was really, really insightful. So we have lots of questions on the Q&A function. So guys who are listening, please keep them coming. I am going to read some questions out to you, Sarah, if you want to start putting them out to the panelists. First one is, for each charity, I'm interested in comparing how many community fundraisers you have in the team and how many were furloughed.
Clara, maybe at the bigger charity, do you want to maybe share, if you can, or sort of a percentage wise, if you don't know exactly figures?
Don't know the exact figures, but usually we run at 81 fundraisers across the entire country. I want to say, and I know I've got a couple of people from Marie Curie on here, so they can always correct me, but I think there were probably about 30 of us left, sort of like kind of during furlough, the retained team. So,
Yeah.
and we weren't all working sort of like kind of full time, but yeah, we just basically sort of like took on all of the different areas.
So like a third capacity, basically, give or take. Yeah. Sean, how about you?
Sorry, just unmuting. I think there are 12 or 13 of us regional fundraising officers across the UK. Initially in May, everyone apart from the three of us that weren't eligible for furlough were furloughed until July, and then on July, two RFOs would come back every month, but a different two on like a cycle, until November, when we've just come back as a full team. So yeah, we were operating on quite a low level. So it's quite strange, especially for me, because I'd gone from just doing East London to having to do the whole of the south of England within like a month of starting the job. So at first it was quite a lot of pressure, but yeah, it was good. I think as good as it could have been.
Definitely. Leah, did you notice anything different in your area or your charities?
So I was furloughed with the organisation I was working with. Now, I was the only community fundraiser. So I was furloughed along with another fundraiser who supported events and elements of service delivery as well. But parts of the team were overlapping with community. So Jo's actually in here. I waved to her earlier. So she's still part of the team I was working with. But I actually made my decision to leave the team in September to pursue supporting other organisations. But I know that they will get back to doing what they do best as soon as they can.
Definitely. I think for anyone who is furloughed or was furloughed, it's never a reflection on the value of community or events ever. The purpose of that scheme was to try and save money and to try and protect jobs. And as someone who had to look at a team in lockdown 2.0 and think about whether we need to furlough anyone or not, it's never an easy decision. It's never about you individually. And just, when you are back in the office and back at your desk, just keep showing the awesomeness that is community. And someone was saying in the chat earlier, I think it was Martin was saying, community seeds all of those other areas. And that is 100% the case. And we've actually made a case at our charity for a new community fundraising role based on exactly that, in that it will seed all the other areas. So don't forget that. You're doing awesome.
Lovely. Okay, so Clara. Oh, I'm now really paranoid about saying your name wrong. You've got quite a few questions on here. You're very popular. So first one is, how did you promote all your virtual events at Marie Curie across your volunteer and supporter base, and what worked well?
Okay, so as I said, we did do a lot of calling and a lot of emailing to our existing database. We started a new community corporate database that we all sort of like kind of fed into, and social media. That is absolutely massive, I think, to sort of like kind of encourage people to do things and to get involved, and especially for the quizzes and things like that. A lot of our sort of like kind of support came from throwing that out on Facebook, and sort of like kind of, and getting the people that are involved in it to share. I think that's the other thing, is that you kind of go, oh well, I've only got so many followers, but actually if you've got somebody involved, they have their own friends, and it's just getting everybody to sort of like kind of share and encourage everybody else to share.
Perfect, thank you. Question for you, Sean. Now we have some rags fundraising for us, but they're getting disheartened when the events get cancelled. Do you have any ideas we could suggest to them within restrictions?
I think it's a difficult one to give any specific ideas. I think rags at the minute, especially in places like Manchester, where some of the unis seem to be like prisons and it's a bit awful for them, I can understand why they're being disheartened. But I think having conversations specifically with them to see what they're sort of interested in as a starting point is a great place to start, and then being really kind of versatile and adaptable to try and think of ways to adapt normal events to a more virtual world, similarly to some of the great inventive ideas that Claire was going through, that her fundraisers have done throughout the year. I've seen universities do, obviously things like bucket collections are really big for universities. I've seen some universities do a similar thing in terms of like sitting in fancy dress on a webcam all day, and getting people to donate on a Just Giving page or whatever fundraising platform they use. And I think just trying to be really inventive in the way that you can adapt everything to a virtual world. I think with universities in particular, I think they're more able to be a bit more creative and inventive than some other groups, because of I don't really know why, but they always have some great inventive fundraisers. I think it's just kind of encouraging them at the moment, letting them know that it's okay. Not, like I said before, that it's probably not the best time for everyone, but anything that they do is great, and just trying to be really inventive and flexible around adapting their ideas virtually. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Thank you. Quick question. Well, this is a question for all of you, really. So are you planning for real life events in 2021, and are you making them virtual friendly as a backup?
Yes and yes,
Yeah.
I would say.
I mean, we've been doing that even this year. So the Santa's Grotto I mentioned, even at the early part of the year, we were like, we're still going to work to see if we can make that physical. And then when lockdown 2.0 happened, we were all sitting there going, oh my gosh, can it still happen? And we did bring in a virtual Santa's Grotto as well, which we're running. So Zoom calls with Santa as well as the actual grotto. And the actual grotto is completely distanced. It's got screens. It's 3 meters apart. It's presents handed in a basket. Like, it's so as safe as anyone could physically make it. And I think that's the thing to embrace for 2021 is plan as much as you can with as much of the restrictions in place. And then if the restrictions ease, or the situation gets better with the vaccine, etc., brilliant. And if you've got a virtual option as well, if you run both, great. If you need to transition to one, it's all about just trying to be fast and flexible and allowing your planning to help you be fast and flexible.
I'd also say on that you should also consider the reputation of your organisation. So I've spoken to fundraisers recently who have said, I'm thinking about going back into the virtual, the bucket collection, starting doing the face-to-face again. And I say, but just because you've seen other charities do it doesn't mean you should. If your organisation is national and you've got areas that you can do them, you can't spread that across the whole organisation. So just remember, sometimes actually going back face to face and doing something where your beneficiaries are potentially at risk, your volunteers are at risk, sometimes there's a very high risk element. So just consider that as well.
Perfect. Anything else anyone wants to add on that one? No, I'll keep going. There's so many questions. Okay, so another question, interested in what your take up on virtual tea parties was. Did people struggle to know what they could do virtually? So this is another question back for you, Clara.
The take up obviously was not as high as our usual, blooming great tea party. It's sort of like kind of massive thing, but it was much higher, I think, than we expected it to be, and we brought it in quite quickly. We're doing a sort of like kind of a similar thing at Christmas with mince pies and mulled wine for Marie Curie. So but we really made it very simple and did a step-by-step guide, how to set up your Just Giving page, how to do a Zoom call, or all of those things, and literally gave everybody a step-by-step guide of how to do things. So yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think we were quite surprised by the number of people that we wouldn't necessarily have thought would have done it that did do it, because obviously I do think you kind of go, oh, but it's all of our old ladies, they won't, but actually they embraced it in a sort of like kind of in a really lovely way, and all got online because they're used to talking to their grandchildren, or sort of like kind of things like that. So actually it worked really, really well.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so another one for everyone. So a bit of a different spin, shall we say, on this question. With fundraising since March, what have you found more effective? COVID-19 impact statements emphasising effect of the pandemic on your charity services, i.e. since lockdown, we've seen an X increase in demand, or more optimistic, hopeful narratives emphasising positivity and celebrating successes?
Lovely question. Who was that from? That's fantastic.
Jacob.
Thanks, that's brilliant. I think there's been a real mix. Certainly in the 3 months that I've been with some of the charities I'm working with, there was a stance on a lot of grant applications were focusing on COVID delivery and at the time, whereas now I think a lot of them are focusing on the impact or the positivity for the future, and I think we're slowly adapting to that now. Recently on Facebook, I've trialed a few posts saying this is what we've achieved throughout lockdown. We're so pleased to be able to keep our school open throughout lockdown too, enabling our children with autism to continue to have that continued support. And just a simple post raised £200 on Facebook. So I think people are, I'm sick of it, absolutely sick of listening to COVID-19. I mean, we're hating it, aren't we? It's horrible. But hearing something positive, people are more likely to engage in it. So I would say keep it positive, especially in December. Keep it Christmassy, nice and positive.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Leah. I think at the beginning, it was all very much sort of like kind of how this is impacting us and the effect that it's having. And now I think people, especially moving into Christmas and moving into 2021, it needs to be about what we've achieved, what we need to achieve, and, you know, and sort of like kind of not, I mean, obviously I work for a charity that, you know, works with those living with a terminal illness. So positivity isn't necessarily, you know, our sort of like kind of cornerstone, but you know, sort of like kind of absolutely focusing on the positive things that we can do to support, you know, people living with terminal illness rather than the negative stuff from the beginning of the year. Definitely.
I'm going to pop my, go on, Sean, go for it.
Oh, sorry.
Go
yeah, I'd agree with what everyone said so far. I think it is really important that people are aware of the impact that COVID-19 has had, but definitely to leave them with a positive note and a hopeful note and a real kind of call to action of what they can do to help make a positive change is really good as well. Sorry.
Definitely. I'm going to put my individual giving hat on for a moment, and it's fundraising is always about showcasing the need, and more to the point, showing how your donors can meet that need. And that's, you know, we all know that. We know that's fundraising 101. But it's true. You also can't completely bombard someone with issues, problems. The world is in despair. The world's on fire. You know, all of that, because people start to turn off. And, you know, exactly what you were saying, Leah. And that balance of the hopeful messages and the positivity and that beautiful stuff whilst showcasing the need. And this is why it's so important to plan out your comms and plan out your supporter journey and plan out that messaging journey you're going to take people on. So for me, when I started the hospice in June, the emergency appeal had been out and running for 3 months. It was still going strong, still bringing in a shed ton of money, absolutely ridiculous amount from trusts and IG and all the rest of it. And it was like, right, well, what's next? Because at that point we were thinking there might be a second lockdown, like bigger than it was. We're gonna have the Christmas appeal, you know, we've got all of these things. But before we get to there, we can't completely drain people out from all of this emergency giving. So for me, the most important piece of comms we did was our newsletter that went out in October time. And that was a whole newsletter just focused on the positive, beautiful, amazing stories that our community had done. And that was the theme throughout the whole letter. The whole newsletter was, our community is awesome. Our community came together. It was really playing on that message of the community, you know, everyone out clapping in the streets, everyone supporting each other, that real beautiful, hopeful positivity. It was at the start of lockdown. And by the time we got to the autumn, everyone was starting to get a bit, where was that? We wanted to re-inject that, bring that back in. And that worked because for us, it is a local community. It's 2 boroughs we were talking about, and we could really hone in on that. For you, it might be the community of people who care for people with Alzheimer's dementia. You know, whatever your community is, bring that community together and make it really about who your donors are and what they feel. I really think your comms should be about, you are awesome, you are generous, you are kind, you are strong for standing with your community. The more you can weave those into your comms, the more your donors are going to respond to that. And then when you do have your next ask, so for example at Christmas, they've got that message of, yeah, we're awesome, yeah, we did this as a community, yeah, we're amazing, of course we're going to give to you again. She says Christmas Peel's landing this week, so you know.
Okay, brilliant. That's really useful. Thank you. Again, a slightly different question. So this is more about, is there anything excuse me, let me start again. Is there anything any of the speakers can recommend for tiny charities where everyone is a volunteer? So no larger teams to work with, small committee, lots of good intention with very limited time and funds, almost no access to celebrities. Although I've approached several and managed to get one celeb who judged a photo competition for us. Any specific advice for tiny charities would be useful.
One of the organisations I used to work for before Wheelpals, the very start of my fundraising career, the fundraising team did a very simple exercise where we were encouraging staff to engage in fundraising. And instead of saying, Sarah, go and do our London Marathon this year, we said, Sarah, can you go home and share our Facebook posts? Can you go home and tell your friends about our London Marathon spaces and encourage them to tell their friends? Because what you find then is, instead of asking Sarah, one person, to do it, you've potentially told 6 people without even doing anything. Really, really simple. So the advice I would suggest is to encourage people to share information and try and recruit people. You might find that in your volunteers group, there's a few ambassadors that could champion an idea and really take it on. You could do that virtually, you can do that face to face, and it can continue, but that's so beneficial. So I'd encourage that as my point.
Great. Anyone else wants to add to that question, or shall I move to the next one? Okay, I'm going to keep moving on. This may be our last question. We are swiftly running out of time. Okay, so let me see if I can squeeze a few more in here. So, okay, this is quite interesting. So the majority of our supporters are older people and aren't familiar with technology. I would be interested to hear if anyone has done anything that wasn't via digital. Anyone?
We did it's a bit of a blend. We did a Christmas fair. I keep saying we. I did none of this. The team did this. I have done none of this. Don't let me take credit. If any of my team are on this, I have done none of this. The team have been awesome. They did an online Christmas fair. So it was online, but it was relatively simple. The landing page and links off to stall holders. Online raffle, and did afternoon tea. And they had a whole system where we had 1 or 2 volunteers who could come in and were safe and all the rest of it to package up these teas all as safely as possible, and then collected with a fixed slot. I lost count of how much it raised. It was amazing. Again, I appreciate that's a very local base. If you've got a base to do that out of, like a hospice, it's quite specific. But I just come back to talk to your supporters and look at what they normally do and think about how you can tweak and transition that. It doesn't have to be about the brand new ideas and the engaging new audiences. Sometimes it's about just taking what your audience already know and love and engage with, and just finding how you can deliver that within all of the regulations and safety and all the rest of it.
Definitely, it all boils down to understanding the point that Sarah made previously, understanding who they are, what they like, how they engage, what they usually do. So even outside of this pandemic, what were they doing 2 years ago? How were they giving? What did they give by your mailing newsletter or your mailing Christmas campaign? Just utilize those ideas and try to adapt it to now. I appreciate that's really hard at the moment. We might not have budgets to send out mass mailing or the capacity to do so. But by knowing your data, data, I love it. Understanding who you've got there, you might pick 10 people to send a Christmas mailing to with a little donation form in. Could be a little jackpot for this Christmas.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, I think that is going, we might be able to squeeze just one really quick question in, and then that's really going to be it. So
one for Sean and Clara, sorry.
Sorry, did you want to answer the?
Oh, I was going to say, have we got one? I know Clara and Sean were getting specific questions in the chat, so there may be one for.
Yes, there is. Clara, it's back to you. So question for you about fundraising groups. It's great to hear that your groups continued their support through lockdown. Would be really interested to hear what other sort of things your groups have done throughout lockdown and how you've engaged so well with them during this time. It's felt like a really challenging time to engage our older audience. So quite similar actually to the last question, who are more vulnerable and less keen to do things virtually online.
So our fundraising groups are made up of a huge sort of like kind of mix. So some of our sort of like kind of, I would say, younger ones, they moved their sort of like kind of events online. So for example, our Camberley group moved their Spook Fest, which is this huge Halloween sort of like kind of party they do. They wrote an original story, they videoed it, they sent it to schools in exchange for a donation. They packed up sort of like kind of sweets and packages and delivered them safely, COVID safely, to people's houses in the area, things like that. Obviously, some of our older people made face masks and sold those to local people. They did their own teas in their own kitchens and then went and left them on people's, you know, sort of like doorsteps. They just called round their friends and things. So it wasn't huge amounts, but if everybody in each community is doing that, that really starts to add up. So, you know, sort of like kind of, yeah, it was just about, you know, them sort of like kind of just keeping busy and keeping engaged and getting on the phones. I know, old school.
Brilliant, you can't go wrong with old school, I tell you. Okay, so thank you to all the panelists, that was amazing. Apologies if we didn't get your question, they were coming in thick and fast. We really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing the next slide, Stephen. Juliet, shall I hand back over to you?
You can do indeed. Yes, thank you very much for that. That's absolutely brilliant. Some really good takeaways. For me, it was lovely to be reminded that we can be positive and it's not as grim as some people like to make out. Some top tips there: reaching outside your networks, being kind to one another, be kind on yourself. And I think we're all going to rush out and do our list of attributes for our supporters. So thank you so much. Our next First Thursday event will actually take place on the second Thursday in January the 14th at 10 AM, where we'll be holding another panel session, this time focused on individual giving. So please do join us. And in the meantime, stay safe. And is it too early to say Merry Christmas? Well, I just said it anyway. So thank you so much. Thanks for coming and see you soon.